Hey guys, welcome back to how to build your layout from start to finish. Today we're talking about ballasting track. There's several different ways of doing it. I'm just going to show you my way, which has been good for me. So let's go ahead and take a look. First thing I want to point out is if you're ballasting switches, which I'm not going to show you how to do, you're going to want to cover the switch points with tape, because the rocks will get into these points here and not allow your track switches to operate correctly. So go ahead and tape that off if you're going to do that. Another key thing for ballasting switches is go ahead and paint the roadbed gray or whatever color ballast you're using. That'll help out a lot. Now let's get over to the areas where there are no rails, from where we had to solder the rails together for this flex track. Now if you remember back in the video where we did the laying of flex track, I told you keep the ties that you're cutting out for later. There's a reason for that. It'll save you money in the long run, because if you didn't keep the ties, you're going to have to buy what's called end ties from whatever company that makes your flex track, in this case Atlas. But I kept some also, and what you want to do with these is sand these down to a fine finish here, where there's no little braces where the tracks are kept anymore. This one is not sanded down, but just in the essence of time I'm going to show you anyway. Once they're sanded down, they'll slide right under and they'll incorporate fairly well with your track. Like over here, I can show you where I've done some that look pretty good. Right there. It doesn't look perfect, but you can get the spaces down to where it's very hard to tell, especially after it's ballasted. Another reason you might want to stay away from the end ties is this reason right here. The end ties have a little gap in between for the rail joiners, and it makes kind of a little square in all of your track, which doesn't look prototypical. So that's another good reason to stay away from the end ties and save these ties from your flex track. If you have to, I suggest go buy an extra piece of flex track just so you have end ties, or these ties available instead of using end ties. Now let's go ahead and get to ballasting. The first thing you want to do is get yourself a good cup that can flex and bend appropriately. I'm not an Oakland Raiders fan, I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan. I'm just getting that out of the way right now. Just took my wife to a Raiders game because her Houston Texans were playing them. So I got a cup that's good for ballasting. Get a nice little angle going on here, and you just go along the edges. I'm only going to do a short portion in the essence of time, but what you're going to want to do is try to point the cup towards the track. That's the best way to get the ballast evenly spread. If you have to, actually push it up against the edge of the track. That helps also. Another tool you're going to want to have on hand today for ballasting is a vacuum, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Say I go over too much and it's not very even, so I'll try to do a better job of going over here. Then you're going to want to put some in the center here, like that. Now, you want to take a brush about the width of the track. So what I have here is a 1-inch wide brush, and I'm going to go push the ballast into the ties, in between the ties. Don't worry about getting it covering the top, just push it in between the ties. And then you're going to want to brush it off. Brush it off evenly. One of my ties moved. Fix that. Brush it off on the top. Now before you go to gluing anything down, which we'll get to, you want to make sure that this is exactly how you want it. Because once you glue it down, it's hard as a rock. It's not impossible to fix, because you can always make it wet and loose again, but it's very messy. So ballasting to me is like an art. Some people are going to be better at it than others, but basically, you know, you can get an idea of what it's supposed to look like. A little kid can make a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you could probably see what it looks like and understand that that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but a grown-up can do the same thing. What we're trying to do here is just get enough artistic skill to this ballasting to where it looks somewhat prototypical, because you see these pros and they've got this perfect ballasting that's not or that's very even all the way around, but it's not very prototypical, because if you go out there, there's rocks a little over here, there's some spread over there, so it's not perfect. So in real life, so in my opinion, a little bit of unevenness is okay, because that's how it is in the prototype out there on the rails. Now, time for our vacuum. I've evened this out. All my ties are showing. The ballast isn't covering any of the ties. You want to even out this center too. Just taking the brush sideways, evening it out in the center. Now I got my vacuum, and if you can, try to jury rig something up like I did. I took a nozzle and I taped off to where it was just the very end of the nozzle right there is showing. And I use this crappy vacuum. You don't want to use a good one, so hold on and I'll just even this up. All I'm going to do, and I want to talk over the vacuum, is even this up with the rest of my ballast and make somewhat of a straight line. But keep in mind, perfection is not prototypical. Okay, so that part right there, except for the gap in between the tables, is pretty even and looks pretty good. Now let's talk about how to secure this down. This ballast has to be secured, and the only way to do that is to get a couple of items that you'll need in order to make this as hard as a rock. Now, one of the items you need is a spray bottle, any kind. I actually don't recommend this kind because it sprays not very mist-like. You want a mister, it'd be better. But this has a little couple capfuls of alcohol, and the rest is water. And all you're going to do is spray this down here. And the reason I don't like this is because sometimes it displaces my ballast. You're going to want to do the other side as well. And you're going to get it fairly soaked, because it's going to need to absorb this, which is 50% glue, 50% water mix. Now I just put this in a Dawn dishwashing detergent thing here, but basically you just pour that on. And it should absorb into the ballast pretty well, since you soaked it down with alcohol. If you don't soak it down with alcohol, it's not going to absorb, it's just going to clump up and run off. And then you'll want to run a stream in the middle. Don't worry about your track being dirty or anything like that. That's what track cleaners are for, and we can get into that later. But that is the essentials of ballasting. I always told you guys that I'll tell you what I think I did wrong, what I could do to fix it. I think I may have or I should have put in one solid line of ballast in between these two main lines, because that would have looked more realistic, and I liked the way it looked, but I didn't realize it until I got almost to the end of doing this ballast job. So that's something I could do later on if I wanted to, but right now I'm just going to leave it the way it is. That's another mistake that I suggest that you take a look at, and maybe consider one ballast job in between the two main lines instead of a gap like I've got here. Thanks for watching. See you next time.